Hello and welcome to NavTalk. NavTalk is proudly brought to you by the Navwealth Financial Group, helping you reach your destination in life on purpose. My name is Simon Prowse and I'll be your regular host for this series of podcasts. And I look forward to bringing you interviews and content on a broad range of topics. Topics that will be educational, inspirational, informative and at times fun. Well, hello everyone and welcome to today's NavTalk topic. So you want to start a business. I'm here today with Peter Hickey. Hi Pete.
Hi Simon.
Peter is an entrepreneur and a successful business owner, and I thought there's no one better to talk to us today about setting up a business than you, Pete. Before we get into our topic, tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, I probably, like any kid, always dreamed of starting a business. I was sort of almost like felt I was born to be an entrepreneur. But went to university, left university, got my first job working for a small business, very small business, where very quickly you were doing everything in the business. Everything from marketing to taking orders to, sort of dropping stock around. And I loved that, absolutely loved it. Went overseas, backpacked around the world for a while, had a little stint in consulting in the UK, which was enjoyable, and then got a job with a product manager of they were a multinational, and they had an Australian division, and I was the product manager for squash balls. Now, Simon, that was a very important job. The funny thing about that was we took Dunlop's 90% market share down to about 10 or 20% because our company developed the first non-marking black squash ball. And so my role was to travel around the world and sell these squash balls to everyone. There was only one problem. So it was a great job, flying around the world, young kid, almost being an entrepreneur of this division. You know what happened? They forgot how to make a squash ball. So they changed factory. The guy that was head of production had a heart attack and they changed suppliers. And all of a sudden, we had a 40 to 50% breakage rate of these squash balls. And here I was, a product manager. So I had the world's number one, Jahangir Khan, at the World Open. Imagine that. We were the sponsor and he broke 3 of our balls in the warm-up. So we were getting abused. So my role, I was head of a squash ball division, was only a small division, but I was head of that. So I was getting abused every single day. And our production department didn't talk to the marketing, the sales, and I'd go down to the factory floor and I'd see that they'd stopped production or that they hadn't started everything. And then I'd go up to the boardroom and they said that they were doing everything fine and it was just about to come online. So I just thought, I can do this better. So at that stage, Simon, I left, started up a consultancy, and that was the first start of a consultancy, which then morphed into a technology business, which I then built up, sold to a multinational, and ended up buying it back and recently selling it to a private equity company. So a journey that started really out of just seeing how badly sometimes things can be done and how a fantastic company can be taken down, and just thinking we've got to be able to do this better.
So when you came up with the idea of setting up your own shingle or business, was it forged on an idea or a something that came to you during the night, something that said, I want to do this, or what was it?
Well, I think the initial idea, and this is probably the advice I give to everyone, is that, number one, I didn't do everything right. I did a lot of things wrong, but adapted and evolved over a period of time. But I had an idea. I started with that idea, and like a lot of business owners, it didn't work. I almost starved to death. So the idea that we had, the initial concept of the business was to approach business owners about messaging and sort of how they talk to people and use illustrations and cartoons to do that.
So it was a marketing style business that you wanted to set up.
It was a marketing consultancy, and that just didn't work. And I tried and tried and tried, hit my head against a brick wall, got a part-time job to survive, sold T-shirts and cold canvassed around North Sydney just to survive. And then over a period of time, though, it was either give up, get out, and say I was unsuccessful, or stay in it and make the model work. And so we evolved that model, and really talking to many business owners and hearing a lot of no's, finally discovered that what business owners needed was a business plan. And when I started saying and evolving that from messaging to planning and helping them do business loans for bank loans and, to help grow the business, but they started saying yes. And I actually realised that that was where my profession had taken me. So having a strong marketing background at university, going through and doing nothing but business and marketing plans for the companies I work with, I didn't realise how much expertise I'd had in that space.
So when you're earlier you talked about you graduated university and went and started working for a small business. Your graduation or your degree at uni was in marketing? In the marketing space?
Yeah, it was Bachelor of Commerce, major in marketing.
Okay,
yeah.
So you had sort of the ingredients, if you like, to really understand what a business needs to drive sales and build in that way. Yeah,
absolutely. Okay. And you just hit the nail on the head there, that driving sales in the first days when you run a business, I call it, every business got a life cycle, and at each stage in that cycle of the business, there are different things you need to do to be successful. So I call the first phase, you've got your nightmare phase, which is your startup phase. Then you got your growth, then you got your scale and systemize, your maturity, and then possibly your decline. But in that first nightmare phase, you've got to have a hell of a lot of resilience, Simon. You got to stick with it, and you got to evolve, and you can't be a fraud.
Let me take you and put your business hat on for a second, and not where your business took you and what your business actually did. Let's put your business hat on, and you've come up with an idea overnight. And you go, I'm going to go and set up my business. Did you sit down and formulate a business plan, or how did you go about setting it up?
Okay, so the first thing I did was I did have a business plan. The business plan was heavy on marketing and light on the financial side. Right. And every part of that business plan was forecasting success. So it was how many business owners are there? If I get a 5% success rate or 3% or 2% success rate, these are the numbers I can do. This is how we scale and grow. I think the biggest problem that you've got, and then you go and ask your sister, your mother, your brother, your friends, do they think it's a good idea? And everyone always says yes. That's the trouble. So you're building the premise of the business plan on the basis that you're going to be able to sell it. And the trouble is that when you actually get out and you start the business, then things don't happen quickly. And people don't really like what you've got, or you don't communicate it well enough, or you haven't got the right marketing material. And that's why that first phase of the business is the most difficult. So yes, I had the business plan, didn't really have the financials in place. I spent a lot of money on marketing initially that had the wrong positioning. It took a lot of budget and produced almost zero results. So, so I did have a plan. I would recommend to anyone that's going to start a business, I would highly recommend that you trial it in some way, shape or form beforehand. So if there's any way that you can develop a prototype of the product, or you could get some advance orders. Like I helped a business owner launch a new product, and it was a brand new product. He was light on funds. We developed a prototype, went to one of the big hardware chains and said, here's the prototype. If we can get it in at this price and have it here by, in 6 weeks or 2 months, how many would you order? And so we actually got an advance order, to start off with. So I think if you can take somebody and say, would you actually put your credit card on the table and pay $500 for that or $1,000 for that? That would be great, because what you're doing is you're trialing the feasibility of it. You're doing a market test, a market sample.
Yeah, a bit like taking a car for a test drive. You're really getting a feel for it before you go and jump in and spend the big bucks, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Pete, it's really interesting. You said you did a business plan, and yes, it was a bit flawed because it was high on marketing and what have you. The fact that you did a plan is quite exceptional, given that most businesses don't do a plan. And when we probably look back at the years when you were setting up your business, it was probably even lesser businesses doing a plan. Why did you do a plan? in your mind, and what would you have done differently now if you were doing that plan again?
Yeah, good question. You got to remember my background was to do plans, so that every job I've ever had revolved around doing a plan, some shape or form. I think and I obviously would never go out and do something without having some idea. I don't think any business owner could. But in my case, it was a documented plan. The trouble about the plan was it was naive. So even though I was inverted commas, a sophisticated planner, when you just go through and go, who are my competitors, who's the market, what's the business analysis, then, what are the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, it was all very naive, because basically, if you're starting up a business like I was, you need to feed yourself. You need to earn enough money to pay for the overheads. And like when you're making that plan, which I did, on false assumptions that people are going to sign up and I'll have my first client in the first month and I'll have 3 by month 4 or month 5, that's the problem. So it's the contingency if that doesn't work. So what would I have done if I had approached it now? I probably would have. But you've got to go to the mental state as well, Simon, of how I was at the time. Like I was being abused in the job I was at because of the product disruption that our company had. So I just had to get out of the current job from a mental health perspective as well. But if I had been in a normal job and I was thinking of starting up a business, what I would have done is spent more time and try to get a contract before I left. And I would have tried to get some cash flow. If I could have built up that cash flow in the beginning. Now, I built cash flow from other sources to finance the business until we became phenomenally successful. So it's that you've really got to think about cash flow, and you've got to think about cash flow contingencies. That no one really should start a business unless they've got 6 months of cash flow. That's able to pay for those overheads and all the rest. I probably had a month of cash flow. Because in those days, I don't know whether you know, it's quite, different today to what it was, but I also had a loan. A loan was at a 14% interest, and it suddenly went up to 18% interest at exactly the same time that I decided to start the business. So there was a real suck and a drain on cash flow and all sorts of bad things that were happening at the same time.
So 2 takeouts for that for me are, if we're doing a product, go and do a tester and see if someone will buy it and actually spend the money. Mm-hmm. Or if we're doing a consultancy or an information exchange, actually get your first client and get some runs before you go and really have a crack in terms of, I'm going to go and get premises and staff and so forth. And coming back to your plan, that premise and the staff and the overall growth and financial side, would you say that that's fundamental to a plan, a good plan?
So what, the focus on...
The business plan, sorry. Would you say all those factors are fundamental to a good business plan?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the sort of plan you do as a startup is very different to the sort of plan you would do a year or 2 years down the track. Because as a startup, you're really focusing on the business model and the feasibility and just, sort of who you're going to sell to. So at the very beginning, you haven't got the information. At the very beginning, you can imagine you're going down this dark tunnel and you suddenly discover, hey, this suits that person over there. Or if I modify the product or change the price, I seem to be getting some success down there. So by the time you get to the end of the first year, you've got a lot more information to go on, so your business plan then evolves. And the most important thing that I think we did was that we constantly listened. So I constantly, when it was a one-person business, you've got to remember that we went from 1 to 30 staff, and we went sort of once we started to scale quite rapidly. And when you're a single-person business, you're communicating with everyone, you hear the ideas and how to evolve, and you're adaptive. You've got to be adaptive. You've got to evolve. And then as you build the staff in, when we get to year 2 to that plan or year 3, you've got to make sure that, number one, that the information is there to make decisions. So the employees that you put on board have to have a system to get that information back to me. And they've got to report on it. They've got to be smart enough. So one of the things that I've always sort of thought as I built my business is, I educate people. I make them positively empower people, but then I make them feel like an entrepreneur. I make them sort of understand that, the most important thing we can do is to keep the customer happy. If we're not keeping the customer happy, why not? And what can we do to keep them happy? And that goes back to evolving the product, evolving the business model, training the staff up to be better than what they were before.
So it's interesting you're talking about the evolution and the contingencies, and a good business plan has these factors built into it. When you did your business plan, did you actually go and revisit that regularly, or is it something that the business just evolved and you didn't refer back to the plan? And did you go back to that plan and evolve it?
Yeah, so to me, a business plan is not that single document that sits on your desk that you come back to once a year or once every couple of years. To me, a business plan is a dynamic document. And to me, the business plan is really, moves into a monthly accountability document. And that monthly accountability is where you get things done, but you also adapt to what's happening. And so any business plan, and so as I did the business plan, I did this naturally, is I would get signals. So I'd find out, so I'd report on a monthly basis of how many inquiries we had coming in, of how many conversion rates we had, of how many outbound calls we made, so that, I wouldn't just see at the end of the month that our sales were down or up. Through other metrics that we would collect, you would understand why that's happening. And then we'd have a chance to evolve the plan.
You've also mentioned a few key factors in that, Pete. You've mentioned the business metrics and the feeders, or if you like, the KPIs. Mm-hmm. How did you identify those KPIs for your style of business? How do you go about building those KPIs and so you get the reporting?
Yeah, well, to me, I'm very, very focused on the numbers, but focused on the marketing numbers. So a lot of people are focused on the expenses and all the rest. With me, I can always cover the expenses. I always forward drive the company. So for me, marketing is all about numbers, and every business owner has to know the numbers. And to me, if I'm running a successful business, it's about activity. And I can recruit an employee there, and if they can only do 2 things a week, then to me they're useless. They've got to be able to do 10 things a week. So we're going to train my staff, we're going to train myself, we're going to have a culture of moving quickly and constantly moving forward. And to me, if somebody calls, if you say to me that a sales rep is calling 5 people a day, I'll say, why only 5? Why are they calling 10 or 15 or 20? Now, you can imagine if you've got a sales team and they're only calling 5 a day, how fast could the business grow if they were calling 10 or 20? You can almost double. So to me, it's not always about looking at the bottom line. It's about looking at the top line and making sure you're going forward, and looking at the top line through the marketing metrics. And that's where I was, as I said, very strongly focused on, which is different to a lot of business owners.
So in terms of identifying those metrics, you're really trying to get those key drivers to a sale or an income stream from your point of view, and it's all about the income, because the rest will cover itself if the income's in the door. Is that a fair assumption?
Absolutely. And here's the difference, is that in those early days, it was all about the client acquisition. So all those numbers were all about client acquisitions. In the second business that I ran and built and just sold to a private equity company, it was all about getting client acquisition in, but then the subscription. So what is the subscription rate and the churn rate? So on the second side, I think as a business owner, I was developing a much smarter business model. And that's the other sort of thing that I sort of looked at from the first side. I built 2 completely different types of business. In the first type of business, the whole business was an aggressive marketing-orientated mass marketing customer acquisition, and then high product innovation rates to sell back to those customers And, because of the nature of technology back then, subscription was very low. So it was a very tough business model to continually scale, once you get to a certain level. Whereas in the second side of the business, the whole business plan revolved around, well, look, let's put the prices up. Let's give a better quality service. Let's have a subscription. Let's target a type of client that's got the propensity to pay. And then let's just be a little bit smarter on that business model. So the first stage, first time I built the business, it was a high growth rates, high client acquisition. Like we sold 40,000 units. Whereas the second time with the higher subscription rate, which was a phenomenally easier business to run, where I spent less time in the business and more time on the business, it was, had less than probably 2,000 clients. So it was really interesting.
You also mentioned before in terms of your sales team and the call rates, and you said you mentioned working on those numbers again, which drove income. How did you motivate your team in that regard, and how did you put the fire in their belly so they could do the 15 calls rather than 5 in a day?
Yeah, okay. Well, it was you had to speak to 12 to 15 people a day, and that means you had to make 25 calls, and so that was the metric back in those days. And I think the first thing is we hired young people, graduates, first year out, second year out. We said to them that, do you want to be an entrepreneur? Do you want to run your own business? You need to make the calls and get us over that break-even point every day in the morning, and then the afternoon you're going to be focused on sales and marketing. And right from the recruitment, we would say, do you want to be part of a high-performance team? We are a high-performance team. We don't want people that think they're the best. We want people that want to be the best. And if you want to be part of our team, we will train you faster and quicker than anybody else. And then you walk away in 2 to 3 years' time. So it was that. It was a culture, Simon. It was a real culture we built up. It was an entrepreneur. I'd empower people so that it used to make me cringe. In that first 6 months, I'd try and get you to make decisions yourself. And the worst part was I knew you'd make some catastrophic decisions, but I would wear the mistakes, because if I threw you in the deep end, got you to make the decisions and wore your mistakes in that first 6 months, and then you learned from your mistakes, it makes you a far better employee. And I could train people faster than anybody else to be good at what they were. And I think you've come across our staff before, and, I've had young kids after a year working for me that sound like they've been, 20-year veterans. And it's all about, to me, the culture. It's a set of standards. It's about accountability. And it's also about the profile of a type of person that we recruited as well. And then along the way, you ask, how do you keep people motivated? Sometimes we put a couple $100 on the board on a Friday afternoon and say, whoever gets a sale, you can take the $100. We'd have incentives at the end of the month. We'd have an award that would say, you are the best, for that particular month or week or whatever. So we tried to do things differently. We always had team building sessions, where we would play tapes or whatever and do some work, which is business related. But then we go out and have some beers and, go out and have some fun. And, if I think of some of the team building we did surfing lessons for the staff. We took them out. So it was all sorts of things.
So in empowering your team, you found their education or their learning was just put it on a stratosphere that was much quicker, and the trajectory to the outcome was quicker.
Yep. And locked into that, though, it's really important is everybody knew how many calls they had to make. Everyone knew what their conversion rates were that they had to achieve. Everyone was congratulated when they did well. We never spoke badly on it. But the other most important part is we had a system. And every week on a Monday, we would have a conversation one-on-one. So it would either be when the business was small, it was me with the employee. When the business grew, it was team leaders with their employees. And every Monday, it would be just a simple thing. How did you go last week? And then we would congratulate you on what you did last week, or say, well, is that all you got? And then we'd say, what are you going to do this week? I don't want to hear about, you're going to do the mail or you're going to do this or that, which is your job. What are you going to do to take the company forward this week? And so everyone would work on a scale. And then every Tuesday morning at 8:30, we would have a company meeting. And we would congratulate the employees that did well. We'd tell everyone about the results. We didn't hide anything. Everyone knew about the numbers we did, about where we were going. Anytime we had a strategic direction shift, everyone would be involved. And we say, this is what we want to do. This is why we're doing it. What do you think? And those two things, a one-on-one meeting. Now, what does a one-on-one meeting do? It gives it gives me the ability to congratulate you. It gives me the ability to say, well, look, your priorities are pretty screwed up here, Simon. Like, you spent all that time doing a brochure and we're well below the break-even line, and you didn't follow up that bank. Why not? So it would help to drive people to the priorities of the company. And then the Tuesday morning meeting was a fantastic, almost team-building exercise where everyone felt included.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the numbers and systems. So you quickly built systems to report those numbers so they were transparent and they were definitive.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say? Yeah,
and I think that's the other thing that you just mentioned there. You've got to have the systems. So when we first started this back in, whenever we did, it was all paper-based. What we did was everything was computerized. It was not like in a system. So we had the number of people that you called in a system. We had your conversion rates in a system. Even the weekly meetings, you would put in your 2 weekly priorities in this platform. And then we could see that platform. That means that when I was traveling over in the US or the UK or through Asia, then I could see what was happening in the business. I could see all the high-level numbers. We had people that were trained to put the numbers in at the end of the month. So we had our office manager that was putting in the Google visitors and the web visitors. We had the salespeople putting in the numbers. And so I could operate the business just on these high-level numbers. And everyone knew that they were accountable for it. So whether I looked at it or not, your employment was you had to achieve this and abide by our systems. So if you don't put it in or fall below, then that's an employment issue.
And did you find that employment issue poked its head up a lot with your team, or less often than you thought in terms of
less often
people?
than what I thought? Like any business owner, you will employ people into a job and their performance will be poor. Our view on that was that if they were genuinely trying, then we would really try and coach them. And I often would change a job role for them, or give them other things to focus on. If I knew someone was absolutely lousy at that, but they were good at admin or office, I changed that role for them, but only if they were committed to that process as well.
The right seat on the bus was pretty critical if the person showed that they wanted to be on the bus.
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, great. One thing we haven't talked about in this whole planning process and building the business and starting it, did you seek outside advice, and in what form did it take at the time?
Yeah, I would totally not recommend this to anyone, but I never sought any advice from anyone because I was a highly defensive business owner that was very stubborn and obstinate. And the most important part is I had mothballs in the wallet. So the reason why I had mothballs in the wallet was because I survived for so many years. It's like being brought up in a depression, where if you're going to survive, you've got to conserve your money. So I never invested in any type of advisor, but I should have.
So knowing what you do now, would you and how would you have gone about seeking that advice?
Oh, well, very simply, marketing. So when it comes to marketing, I don't think that with our expertise we need necessarily help in the marketing, but all the design work that we used to do ourselves, just contract it out. All the website development that we did ourselves, just contract it out. It's a hell lot easier, you get a better job. Some product development that we tried to do ourselves, it was very slow and arduous, and we probably didn't do an A-grade job. I would pay. Marketing, you've got to spend the money on. And sometimes, as much as you think you can save money and do it all yourself, Contractors are great for that. A business advisor, running a business is very lonely. Running a business, if I had the right advice at the right time by someone that was more experienced, it would have helped phenomenally,
Like a business coach in that regard.
Yeah, like a business coach, yeah. Just somebody that you can share ideas with. Sometimes you can come across, like when we were eventually selling the business, having that expertise. That's why I did start to spend money on different people with different areas of expertise.
Oh, Peter, that was fascinating and really insightful in terms of starting a business. So for anyone out there who's thinking about starting a business, what would be some key factors or key advice you'd give them right now before or during that startup phase?
Well, I think the first thing is you got to think of the business model. You really got to think of the business model. The business model has to be a smart business model. So many business owners start up businesses and their business model is just poor right from the start. So it doesn't matter how hard they work, how clever they are, the amount of money they're getting, the volume they're getting, the target market they're approaching, it's just not feasible to build and scale. The second thing is, I think, to really think like it's about marketing. The early stage of running a business, it's all about marketing. And it's all about evolving. So whatever you're going to start up, whatever you think you're starting up right from the beginning, I guarantee it'll evolve. Don't spend too much money on expensive brochures and websites till you've got your positioning right and that people want what you've got. If you're going to start a business, then if there's some way you can trial it beforehand, if there's some way you can develop a prototype or pre-sell something beforehand so you're moving in, it would be great. Or even more clever than that, when you're thinking about your business model and combining the feasibility, if you can find a channel that you can target or somebody or a big customer or an influencer that will guarantee to back you when you come in, I think that's important. I think the other thing that's really important is that you need to have the money, and you need to have that survival money. Now that's a two-edged sword. If I had have had $100,000 in the bank, I probably would have blown it all because I would have continued with the wrong business model. So, but I think not having money does really sharpen you up, makes you become a Spartan warrior. But there's certainly a lot of failure that can be attached to it. And you've got to consider your family as well. I was fortunate. I started up before I had the wife and the kids and and that was a different thing. But the last point I would make to anyone, building a business is the most enjoyable. You are an entrepreneur. You're running your own business. That is fantastic. But you've got to have resilience. And you will be knocked down to the ground. And it won't be every 6 months. It will be every week to 2 weeks. And you've got to learn to get up, go forward, be positive, and you've got to believe in yourself. And you've got to genuinely have a desire to do something that's better than what anybody else has done.
So believing in yourself is key.
Oh, absolutely.
So from my takeouts on that, Pete, and this has been absolutely wonderful, is develop a plan. Your business plan has to be adaptable. Seek advice. Mm-hmm. Don't be afraid to seek advice, even if you've got to pay for it, because quite often the advice will save you time and effort. Try before you buy. Know your numbers. And build your systems to report in, or your matrix around your business to know those numbers and really give you the scorecard on your business as it develops and grows and allows you to adapt. Is that a fair summation?
I wish I could articulate it as well as what you have.
Well, thank you very much, Peter. I really appreciate your time and effort. And, we look forward to your next venture, whatever that might be, whether it be retirement or starting another one.
Fantastic. Thanks, Simon.
Thanks, Pete.
Thanks for joining us today for NavTalk. You can listen to other podcasts in the NavTalk series via YouTube or where you get your favourite podcasts, or simply search NavTalk. Be sure to follow Navwealth on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook or Twitter. And please, if there are any particular topics you would like us to cover for a future episode, let us know via our website. I'm Simon Prowse. Until we talk again.